You can take a photo of something that's beautiful in flat, dull light, and it won't be very interesting. You won't love the photo. But if you find a little shaft of sunlight coming through some trees, and you put anything into that little pool of light, doesn't matter if it's a cup of coffee, your flask of coffee, a shoe, anything, it will just look really interesting and beautiful.
Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast brought to you by CloudSpot. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we are chatting with longtime listener favorite, Nick Church, about the 7 essential skills every photographer needs to grow their craft. But first, the Beginner Photography Podcast is brought to you by, that's right, CloudSpot. With CloudSpot, you can simplify your business with studio management, which means that you can organize clients, send professional contracts, automate invoice payments, and so much more. So keeping track of everything just got a whole lot easier with CloudSpot. Why don't you grab your free forever account today over at deliverphotos.com and only upgrade when you and your business are ready. You know, I first interviewed Nick back in the beginning of 2019 about how he went from being a beginner to going pro as a wedding photographer in just 24 months. And to this day, that remains one of the most downloaded episodes of the podcast for obvious reasons. Well, it's been almost 7 years since then. He's still shooting weddings. So I thought, hey, maybe I'll invite Nick back on to catch up, see how his business has grown and evolved since then as well. And with those extra years of shooting, Nick has come up with a simple list of 7 things that all photographers need to be doing if they want to grow in their craft and become better photographers. And that's what he's going to share with you today. So be sure to get a pen and paper ready because you're going to want to take notes. So let's go ahead and jump on into this interview with Nick Church. Nick, last time you were on was 2019, which is crazy. So not only is the world a very different place, which we were just talking about right before we hit record, but also you were in a very different place. I think you had just recently went full-time in weddings. And I recently listened back to that episode and I could hear the optimism in your voice, right? The excitement in your voice. So now that it's been almost 10 years shooting weddings, or fully 10 years shooting weddings, it's been a long time since we chatted. What has changed most in your perspective about photography since then?
I've got no optimism left. I'm a husk of a man. I'm dead inside. No, I'm not. I'm still really optimistic. Oh, you made me feel that that's a bad thing.
No. Now you're just seasoned, right? It's not as exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I like that, seasoned, yeah. No, so I've been doing weddings now for, so another 6 years from last time we chatted. And it's been great. And it would be a lie to say that it doesn't become a bit of a run of the mill every wedding. And that's made me have to develop a different set of skill, or an additional set of skills, which is to do something different each time, to try and keep things new and try and doing different things creatively and working out how can I do this one, especially if it's at the same venue that I've been to a dozen times before. It would be really easy to, operate at 80% effort level and just do all the same shots, because that couple don't know because they haven't seen the other ones. So right. I am sort of digging deeper in terms of, right, what can I do to make this one different? How can I make this one more creative? How can I keep that interest there? Because I think that's pretty important for motivation, is to always have a feeling that we're doing different things and we're progressing our expertise in an area.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. I don't think I would want to shoot the same venue every single weekend. But there are other photographers who I've interviewed who are like, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
Just show up, you know exactly what you're going to do. You're prepared and you're ready to go. But yeah, no, I'm like you. I would rather have something new going on, view the world through some fresh eyes. So you said that you've had to adapt a little bit and change things up. So what does that look like?
Well, using different techniques, looking for more interesting light, trying to do things a bit more creatively and thinking, oh, that reflection looks, quite interesting there. If I could get that bride standing there or those grooms standing there, then I can work with that and try something a bit different. You don't need to I don't do it all the time. You do have your stock toolkit of photos that are going to work really well. And you have to be a bit careful because as photographers or professional photographers, our brand is our portfolio and they're expecting that. So you can't just completely decide to change up and do something totally different. But yeah, it's just looking at other people's work and without duplicating it, trying to be encouraged by that and take reference to it. And yeah, just getting inspiration from different places and using what I can on the day. One thing I've found since we last spoke is definitely that I've had also to work a lot harder on doing photos for my own enjoyment, and that's something that about a year ago, I guess, I realized that I hadn't taken my camera out for probably a year just to take any photos at all on holiday or anything. I just couldn't be bothered. And I thought that's not a great situation. I want to still have that passion for photography as well as having a passion for my business. And so I have tried to sort of do a few more personal projects and things like that on the side. It's really hard to fit it all in with a really busy kind of calendar of weddings and commercial shoots. But yeah, that's something that's helped as well, because when you're doing that, I actually even bought a different system. I bought a Fujifilm camera as well, just so I wasn't taking my usual work camera. So it felt very different. And that's really helped as well, because when you're doing your own stuff, you can do whatever you like. You don't have a pattern that you have to try and fit it. I don't have to produce the same images. I can just try something completely wacky. And that helps then to put that into weddings. I can then go and think, I'm going to just do a bit of that stuff that I did last weekend on my own, and yeah, that's kept things interesting as well. But what I have found is reducing the number of weddings. I'm sure most wedding photographers, you're probably the same. If you're doing 40, 50, 60 weddings a year, it's very tough to keep enthusiastic and to give that each new couple all of your attention, because we want to make them feel like they're the most important thing on their wedding day, because of course they are. But that's really hard to do at the end of a sort of 45, 55 wedding season, So I've built up the commercial work that I do, so interiors, and I don't do headshots and stuff very often anymore, but it's mostly the sort of interior sort of high-end kind of properties. That is nice because it's just meant that the weddings have come back a little bit into something where I'm still up for it. I'm still interested in it. When I get up, I think, all right, I'm excited to get to this wedding. Whereas a couple of years ago, that was quite hard to do. I still did it, and it was just it took a little bit more effort to be as motivated. So that's been a nice change as well.
Yeah. So what I heard most from that was that Fujifilm cameras give you the creative eye. I love it. Perfect. All other camera systems can just go by the wayside. That's perfect. Love it. That comes straight from Nick Church there. Right. I'm just kidding. But tell me if you feel the same way, because I have found also that personal projects have really helped me. However, coming from weddings where it's like the day is scheduled, you're going to be there that day, and whatever happens, you're just going to photograph that. But with personal projects, there's not a defined date, there's not a defined time, there's not a defined schedule of exactly what's going to happen. So it feels harder to put together and feel like there's a finish line. Do you feel that same way as well? And if so, or if not, how do you deal with that?
Well, no, I do. And I think I suppose when I say projects, I might be overstating it a bit. I'm talking about just going out with my camera for a set period of time with the purpose of taking photos. But you're absolutely right that what happens is that's in your free time, and it's alongside loads of other things that are competing for that same precious few hours, like family and socializing and relaxing and trying to get some exercise and all these other things that you think you've got to decide what to do. So I tend to go out either for a walk and just take my camera and just be a bit more mindful about just going for walks, and rather than going specifically to somewhere I know I can take good photos, just go for somewhere where I like to have a walk with my camera and just trying to look in a different way to as I normally would. I'm normally quite a epic landscapey type viewer. That's what I tend to look for. Yeah. But I'm finding that when I'm doing that, I'm finding things like little fungi or maybe some tree roots or something like that, just much more abstract than I would normally do. And so that feels like quite a nice balance. But it is hard to do it. And when you get really busy, when the editing's stacking up or your tax is due, then of course it's the thing that just falls by the wayside, like exercise and like everything else, it just gets swallowed up at that time.
Yeah, it is definitely hard. I've been through that as well, but I try to keep reminding myself of that phrase. If it's important to you, you'll make time for it. Maybe because I operate based on guilt, right? Like if I guilt myself into it, I'll have to do it. But yeah, that is difficult. And I also am not good at sharing photos, because at least with weddings, it's like they feel like they're meant to be shared, and it's like this moment and how it's going to be delivered in the end. But with personal photos, again, nobody wants to see a photo of just a fungi on Facebook or whatever it is. So then you start to question yourself, well, what's the point of this?
If I ever do post something that's very different, I get a lot more likes on those posts than I do for my wedding things. I think people are probably saturated. I've saturated my feed with wedding images. Yeah, I think people do like the fact that there's something different there. But it is very much I don't even edit some of them. Do you know what I mean? It's the process of just taking them, because to then come back and then sit in front of Lightroom and start editing them ahead of ones that are in the queue that I really need to get cracking on, commercial images or whatever it might be. Then I'm making a bit of a decision that I'm pushing back work, and that's quite a hard one to do when you're running a business. So yeah, sometimes I'll shoot in just JPEG and just get that immediate kind of endorphin rush for saying, oh, that's a really nice photo, I'm pleased with that, and then move on. And then sometimes don't even look at it very often again.
That's the joy of Fuji. Like, that's what I've loved. Once I started shooting Fuji in 2016, and pretty quickly I went straight to JPEG. Like, I just stopped shooting RAW, even like for weddings and whatnot. And still today, I've never had a photo that I thought to myself, man, I really wish that I shot this in RAW. But I mean, I acknowledge that comes with a few years of experience to being able to get it right in camera. And when you're just learning photography, maybe it's not as easy. So
yeah, it gives you a bit of extra headroom, doesn't it? It's a little bit of slightly bigger margin of error when we're starting out. And I find it at weddings sometimes I need that if stuff happens really quickly and I'm grabbing photos like every other human on, you make mistakes, and sometimes I think, well, I'm glad I shot that in RAW. No, well, you're a machine.
Speaking of machines, let's move on from this, because I want to get to the main topic of our conversation today, because you shared with me 7 rules or themes that I think are going to be really important for photographers today. So I guess quickly before we get into that, for those who hadn't listened to your past episode of the podcast, give them a very high-level 30,000-foot overview of how you got into photography and where you're at today in terms of weddings.
Yeah, I had a career in the software industry, and in 2014 I was sent off to do some work in Malaysia, so I had a set of meetings over there. Hadn't ever picked up a camera before, so I picked up a camera, learned how to use it, and started taking photos, and just immediately fell in love with it instantly. The immediacy of it, because I was previously doing pen and ink drawings and things like that, which took a long time. This was just so immediate. I started taking shots of my local city, selling those in art galleries and cafes and things. A lady was looking for some money to buy a print of mine, and she said, do you shoot weddings? And I very foolishly said, absolutely, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I did explain that I hadn't done one, but I would happily do it. And so I became a wedding photographer completely by accident. And I didn't have a vision of that I was going to do it as a career, but it just grew and grew. And it got to a point about sort of 2 years later where I had so many weddings booked in that I thought I'm going to have to decide what to do. I can't do this and a really demanding job. So I was able to just get a few more bookings and then leave that corporate career and do wedding photography full time. So that was when I created Nick Church Photography. Since then, so things have, apart from a little, COVID issue of a few weddings, but things have just escalated from there, and I've done more commercial stuff and also built up the training side of my business as well. So that's something that I really love to do. I do really like sort of mentoring and coaching other people. And this year has been a whole new massive project of creating the Nick Church Creative Academy, which is taking a lot of the content that I deliver in person and putting it online as a suite of online courses. And I really love them. I'm really passionate about them. I've put a lot of effort into them. I really want them to be the best place to get, for a photographer, wherever they are in their journey. So whether they're beginning and want to take a hobby forwards, or whether they have an idea of doing a career, then this course, the Photographer Unleashed course, is aimed at getting them to that point. And one of those lessons that I recorded is my thoughts on, here's just some themes that I found it's really useful for all of us photographers to be thinking about all the time when we're taking photos. And so, yeah, that's what you're referring to, those 7 sort of themes that I've got.
That's perfect. And I think one thing that I love is that, and I'm sure you know this as well, I'll get emails, several a week, from people just asking to be on the podcast, and they're like, I got to share this thing. And I'll just give a quick 10-second look into who they are, because I've never heard of them before. And it's like, oh, they just started photography at last year, and here they are trying to tell people how to build a 6-figure, photography business. And there's not a lot behind that. And that's why I love having people on like you who are battle tested, That doesn't mean old. That just means, you're seasoned, like I said earlier. And you've been, through the trenches of this. And now you're at the point to where you can share that knowledge that you have learned over the years while actually behind the camera. So I'm really excited to hear these 7 things today. So let's start off with number 1. What is the first rule or theme that photographers need to know and keep top of mind?
Yeah, well, these are in no particular order. The first one is avoid gas. So gear acquisition syndrome, which is something that afflicts all of us as photographers. And that's not to say people can't buy stuff, but it's this idea that we can buy something that's going to improve our photography and we're not really sure why it is. And that's the crucial thing. We're buying something in a endless quest to improve our photography, but don't have the data or the understanding about if that's going to make any difference. And so the way that I've had to do an intervention on myself about this, because I love buying kit just as much as everyone else, is to ask myself 2 questions. Does this new thing I'm about to buy, might be a camera body, a camera lens, can I articulate the problem I've got with the thing I've got now? Is that something I can say, right, there's a problem with that, and can I articulate it? Because you find a lot of people I work with just can't articulate, they don't know why there's a problem. So can you articulate it? And the second question, can you be sure that that new thing is going to solve that problem? So if it's like a kit lens, for example, then, you have a problem where you can't really get very shallow depth of field. Then, of course, buying a prime lens, a 50mm prime lens is a pretty low cost way to fix that problem. It's very sort of nailed on. But when you see things like someone might be having problem focusing, they're just having problem focusing, and they find a lens review that says the focusing on this lens is absolutely stellar, and the lens is like $2,000. And of course, unless they've got a really old lens or it's broken, the lens isn't the problem there. It's technique or camera setup. And just by focusing on that one word, they're suddenly dropping a load of cash on something that's actually not going to make any difference, probably. So that's the first one, is to just be mindful of improving our skills with the kit we have, work out into what the problem might be, because we will get to a point where we think, that I've now got a problem with this. I've reached the limits of this kit. Once we can articulate that, that's the time that if you can afford it and justify it, that's the time to move on into a different equipment.
Perfect. Yeah. And my take is like, if you want to buy new gear, buy new gear. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money, but if you want to know if it's actually going to help you as a photographer, you said it perfectly right there. Articulate what problem you're having and what problem this thing is going to solve. And that's something that so many people don't think of. Or one thing that I've noticed a lot is most YouTube reviews, let's say that they're talking about how fast and fantastic focusing is. It's like, compared to what? Compared to a kit lens, yeah, it's probably fantastic. But compared to last year's, L lens or flagship model, what is it, 5-10% better? Is that going to make a huge difference in the way that you shoot? So just trying to be more open about that and aware that there's a certain amount of people on YouTube who are doing everything that they can to sell you that gear rather than just inform you on what it is. So I love it. Number 1, fantastic.
I think that's the reason that we think we're going to improve something, and then you think, well, hang on, this latest lens only came out last year, have no decent shots. Could people not focus before last year? Which clearly isn't true. So.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. What's number 2?
Number 2 is to always be critical about our work. And that's a really important skill, I think, for us to develop. And you can develop it, because I've developed it with coaching clients of mine, to look at your images and try and work out what is it you love about it, what is it you don't love about it. And it's the quest that I've got, and I still do this to this day, is to look at every image I shoot, try and critique it. The ideal situation of every photo I take is generally, this photo I really like, the couple's going to love it, my client's going to love it, it's commercial, whatever it might be. But I also have some ideas on how I could do even better next time. And that kind of relentless improvement, and it might just be composition, or I wish I'd just gone left a bit, or maybe that if I'd stopped down a little bit, that person just a bit further back would also be sharp. But they're still going to love it, and they won't notice that. But it just always helps us get better. And developing those skills is a really useful thing to do, because if we can, and the same applies if we're looking at other people's photos. A lot of beginners, and I can remember feeling this myself, that you look at someone else's photos, you think, man, I wish my photos looked like that. They just don't look like that. And identifying the difference between our photos and some photos that we really love is pretty much the same base skills that we are going to use to get there. We will get there. We just don't know how to get there yet. But having that base skill of seeing the difference and thinking, oh, those colors, or wow, the light, the contrast It's fantastic with the side lighting that's come in. That's all you need to actually get there. It just takes a bit longer. You're a bit further behind, but you will get there then. And we can exercise that by looking at our own work and critiquing it.
Follow-up question there for you, because one of the things that I hear from a lot of listeners is they'll ask how to get better photos because when they look at other people's photos, they just look more polished. But like, that doesn't necessarily mean edited, right? So do you have pillars of things that you look at to determine, well, this needs work, that's okay, this thing could use some work, and then, same with this other thing? Like, I know for me, one of the things that I look for is just my direction of light, right? That's one of the things that I always look for in not only my images, but others. Is there anything else, like a pillar like that you look for to determine this needs help or I'm good with this?
It's often light related. It's either light or depth of field with me. I mean, obviously, if it's a missed focus, then that's just an error. There's no way to you can just fix that. You can't really improve it. But if the depth of field is not right, and I think I've definitely, as time's gone on, not always gone for the shallowest depth of field possible because it's just a bit of an easy win, isn't it? Especially if you've got a nice f2.8, 70 to 200 lens, you can shoot an event and you've got beautiful photos of everybody, but it just looks like a load of really nice headshots. There's no story being played out there. And that needs you to stop down a bit, go a bit wider, bring lots of things into the frame. And that means you can't just have junk in it. It has to be a bit more careful with composition to make sure that things work. And so it's usually things in the frame that I wish weren't there. And I could have easily, some things we can't move, but I could have moved a bit and just avoided it. I could have avoided that and created a much more balanced image. Having anything that's bright behind, certainly when I started out, that was the key thing for me, is I realized by doing this process, well, if let's say there's somebody stood by a window, if I shoot alongside that window, kind of parallel to it, I'm getting some beautiful side light there and the window's not in the frame, so I'm not getting all these blown highlights behind. And those sorts of things have really elevated my work, and that's been really useful.
It's funny how whenever like you'll go somewhere, family gathering or friends or whatever, and they're like, let's take a photo. Let's all get in front of this window. And they want to put the window directly behind them thinking that there's just a bunch of light. And they're like, no, let's turn the other way because otherwise we're all going to be silhouettes. Yeah. But it is funny that like everybody understands that we need more light. They're just using it wrong. So I think you're right. If you can just figure out how to use light, even just a little bit better than most people, your photos are going to take off. They're going to explode. So that was great. All right. What's number 3?
Number 3 is don't try to rescue a shot in the edit. And I see this one all the time, certainly in Facebook groups, where there's a shot that ultimately it isn't quite right. It's never going to be a great shot. This idea that if a shot is going to be great, it'll be great in camera. You look at it before you've edited it and think, wow, that's an absolute banger, that shot. That's going to be fantastic. And then it really is, you really edit it and it's fun. But when you're trying to work on it and you're using AI to sort of select the subject, make them brighter, and then they look stuck on, so you make it a bit dark, you're better off just leaving it as it is. It's probably still a really nice shot, and just do better next time. Go back out there and reshoot it. There's very few situations that you can't go out and reshoot. If it's your kids, a local scene, pets, flora, whatever it is you're shooting, you can go out and do it again. And with that knowledge of that previous rule about what you can improve next time, they genuinely will be better and you will start getting those great shots.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand on me a little bit more, just for those who might be confused? Are we saying no editing should be required, that our goal should always be 100% get it right in camera?
Oh, no, absolutely not. It's not in my rule book, in this list of rules, but that's another lesson on the online course is about photography myths. And that's one of them, people saying that, you need to get it right in camera, that you shouldn't need to edit. And of course you should, because RAW files, for example, need to be edited, and JPEGs are already edited just by your camera, not by you. So no, we definitely need to edit our photos. And there's a point where the editing is bringing out the things that are really lovely about that picture. So if it might be some really lovely, a very autumnal scene, or it might be a very warm, very late golden hour sort of scene, and you can really enhance that with editing. But it was right in camera. It would be too flat in camera, so you need to edit it to bring it out. But it's when there's mistakes in camera that we're trying to fix, we're trying to repair things. And it's become more common now with AI's ability to, remove things, replace things, easily select subjects and make them brighter. And it just never looks great, and you're always going to be better off going back out there.
Yeah. I find that at least when I would go and cull through a wedding, the thing that I would look for first and foremost would always be moment. Like, if it's a good moment, if it's a good laugh, I'm going to save the photo. And then I'll do a second pass and then look at things like lighting, composition, camera settings, things like that. because I know that if I get a photo with a good moment and maybe the camera settings weren't that great, I don't want to say that I can save that in the edit, but like that's already 90% of the way there. Like
Yeah.
for my style of photography, the moment is the most important. And then secondary are the other things like the light, the composition,
Yeah.
the settings. And then those are things that you can, of course, enhance from there.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Everything you said there, that I think I'm talking about. So you absolutely can rescue images. You can make them deliverable rather, right? So you can make shots that, well, it's got some good things that are great, like a moment, like you said, that are really strong images. And a couple don't care if there's blown highlights in the background. They really
Right.
want the fact that everyone was doing shots or there was people just laughing hilariously. That's a lovely photo for them to have. Is it going to be, let's use that as an example, say there were blown highlights because that moment happened and I grabbed my camera and took it. I've captured it. It's too bright, there's blown highlights. It's never going to be a great image as a result. That's going to be really good and it's going to be very great for them. But is it going to be something that I could put on the front page of my website? Probably not, because I can't rescue it. I could replace the sky and do all these other things, but I think you just strike it down as a miss and go back out and think, well, that was really good. Next time I'm going to try and make sure I do that without blowing the highlights. And it's because there's just seems to be you can spend a lot of time fixing things or trying to fix things, trying to make a shot really, really great that hasn't got the legs to get there. Whereas all the time, if you spent an hour in Lightroom and it was a shot from your local forest, you could probably gone there and back and taken another one in that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah. And I didn't mean to contradict what you had said. I think that when you can marry moment with all the other things, the light, the settings, the composition, that right there is a great moment in camera. And now it's set up and ready to go to put in your visual signature when editing. So that's really good. It's really good.
That's always the goal, isn't it, for weddings and events photographers, but I suppose family, even if it's your own family gatherings as well, getting a moment and great light and everything else is like that's what we're all chasing. We're all going for that. And that's why I think photography is such an addictive pastime, because we're always trying to achieve that. And things like all of those things where stuff happens like that, you can't control it. So you can't say, right, all have a really nice moment, but just turn the other way a bit so I can get nicer light on it. It doesn't work. So we're always trying to work with that.
Yeah, you would kill the moment so fast to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're just pumping through these. How about we continue? That was number 3.
Yep,
What's number 4?
Right. Then number 4 is trying to think about what does this photo I'm about to take communicate. And it doesn't mean that every photo has to be a really piece of ironic art or a street photography, something like that. But when we're thinking about this, what does it communicate? Is there a lovely balance to it? Is it a beautiful scene? Is the light really beautiful? Is there some humor in it? Is there some expression? If it's of kids and stuff, some kids, our kids sitting just staring at the camera because they've been sitting there for 5 minutes, isn't it a great photo? But once they look at each other and one of them said something really rude and they're really laughing, that is a lovely photo. And that's it then picks up a load of energy. So having photos that try and communicate something, whether it's sort of emotion or if it's a travel photo, does it really make us feel like we want to go there, or can we walk into that photo? And all of those things aren't things that we can do every time. But when we're thinking about it, I find in my clients that our photography does start to improve because we're thinking, oh, right, there's something here. And it's it's all about that muscle memory. So our internal brain muscle memory, when that's the vision, that's the goal that we're going for, we can actually start to put that into practice. Because otherwise, ultimately, if we don't have anything like that, then it's just snapshots. And those do have value because they capture memories and moments. And, that's how we look back and remember our lives through these snapshots. But that's what they are, they're snapshots. And if we really have a desire to create something that's above that, then we're looking for something else in there. We don't do it straight away, and it's very hard to get it right, but just start thinking about it now as soon as we can, and then that will redevelop sort of in the background.
Yeah, I say something similar, which is like the difference between a photograph and a snapshot is just the amount of intention that went into it, right?
Absolutely,
so it sounds very similar, right? What are you trying to communicate here?
100%.
Yeah. And it can be hard sometimes because, as I think the first thing you said there was like, it doesn't have to be this crazy photo. It doesn't have to be poignant necessarily. Sometimes you're just trying to communicate, this is what my child looks at 9 years old. And that's okay. Sometimes you're trying to communicate, this is what the sun looked like when it was hitting the back of these leaves. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be, this is what life is about. This is the meaning of the world and everything in it. it can be smaller stories. And I think that that can be hard to fully understand. Did you ever go through anything like that, as far as like you felt like you were trying to tell too big of a story and you had to narrow it down? Or are you still trying to tell these massive stories?
I'm still trying to capture something, and it doesn't. I find that it can be something very slight, just a slight sideways glance between, say if it's a wedding, and it might just be a grandmother looking at the bride's dress, and that is a really strong moment. And there's no great big kind of motive behind it. It's just, but when you're looking for those things, you do start to see them all the time, because life is happening everywhere, isn't it? And if we're not thinking like it, we just miss it all the time. And what I find myself doing sometimes is something's happening, and I think, oh, that's amazing. I think, what am I doing? I'm not taking the picture. So I've forgotten to actually take the picture of it, because I'm enjoying the moment happening right there in front of me.
Yeah. It happened to me once. I regret not taking a photo of a flower girl puking into a trash can because she was so nervous. But I was looking at her like, is she going to do it? Is she going to do it? She's doing it. And then it was too late. I missed it. But
yeah,
we've all done that. Should have been behind the camera. Yeah. Well, let's move on to number 5. What do we got?
Number 5 is to shoot more photos than you think you're ever going to need. And this is because if I do a photo tour with people, we'll find a nice scene, we'll find some nice light or something, and they'll take a shot. Yeah, great. I think, okay, you're just going to take the one then. Let's take some more. Because there's nothing worse than coming back. If you just take one photo, you look at it, you bring it up on your computer, it might be slightly out of focus is one problem. You think, oh man, I wish I checked it. Or it might be that you wish you'd taken, if it's something moving or something, you wish you'd taken one just a fraction of a second before or afterwards. And if we're just taking loads, then we're giving ourselves a much bigger toolkit to choose from. I think that the reason often people don't do this is because we're worried about running out of space on our cards. And if that's because you're storing images on your SD card, then that's a problem in itself, because your SD card they're designed for size, not for security. And that is the most fragile place to store your images. So get them off of there, memory cards are so cheap nowadays for sort of $15 for 128 gig. Get a fresh card and just put it on rapid fire and just find, just take loads of options fills. So that's that one.
I have one follow-up question there, which is, talk to me about the balance between shooting with intention and shooting more shots than you think that you need. Because I think somebody listening might think, oh great, I'm just going to put it on burst mode and just shoot a ton unnecessarily.
Yeah. That spray and pray.
Yeah, help me figure out that balance.
So the intention should always be there. Once the intention's there, we are just shooting multiple versions of that same intentional shot, just to give ourselves options. When you've taken lots of shots of the same thing, there's no point taking 200 photos that are exactly the same. So then move a little bit, get a different angle. And that then helps us when we're reviewing them. The intention's still there. It might be there's something about that shot that you really love. But just change the angle and take it again. Change the angle and take a few more options. And then when we're reviewing them, we can think, oh, actually, when I moved lower, I suddenly got different perspective and it feels much more immersive. It feels like I walk into the photo more. And that only happens when we're kind of doing this mode of, rather than just taking a shot, let's take lots of them, let's change our position, take a few more. And we're just intentionally doing it. That's not to say that you just, walk around on rapid fire with your finger held down and just pointing at various different things and hoping that you capture something, because, you never will.
No, oh man. And I can't, that just sounds so dreadful to have to go through 10,000 photos of just junk and hoping that you get one that you like.
I do find that I do take, I'm looking at staring down the barrel of 7,000 photos sometimes from a wedding, and it's really hard to go through. And what's your thoughts on using AI to cull?
Honestly, I haven't used it. From what I've heard from others, they find it great to just immediately get rid of things like duplicates or misfocused or lack of smiles. But, because suddenly, if instead of having to go through 7,000 photos, now you only have to go through 4,000 photos, it's a lot easier to do yourself. Do you do any AI culling?
I don't. No, I don't. I do with editing. I use AI to do a base edit, but I still retouch every shot afterwards. Yeah, and I'm just interested because I think as we've talked about, finding those moments that may not be the perfect photo. Like, let's say you managed to get that girl that was being sick into a bucket and you grabbed it and you got it, but there was technically a little bit of an error there. AI probably wouldn't have included it because it doesn't know, oh, that's quite funny because she's being sick in a bucket.
That's a good point.
So it does miss these things. And sometimes when someone's eyes are closed, they might be closed for all sorts of reasons, not just because they're blinking. They might be emotional or something else. And, I don't know how accurate it is at picking up those moments. I'd hate to miss some of those things just because it's looking for what it classes as good photo. Anyway, that's off topic. We've gone off the tracks a bit.
I still thought that was interesting.
That was number 5. So number 6 is to keep practicing the harder stuff. And this is something that I found when learning an instrument as well, when I was learning guitar a couple of years ago, or learning guitar again because I'd never learned it properly, and realized that just doing a little bit of the bits that are harder, that we're finding more difficult, regularly and often, really help the muscle memory. It's like magic. And you just practice for 5 minutes on the things that aren't so easy, that we're not finding so natural, and then next time you come back the next day, it's easier, and something's happened in the background. It's carried on kind of working even while we sleep, and it's like magic. But you have to combine it because it is harder. It's not as fun to do that stuff, and that's why we can sometimes avoid it. And photography is supposed to be fun as well, so you want to balance it with doing the stuff that you like doing, and also if you're learning manual mode, for example, just take it out of aperture priority or whatever mode you're in and just get into manual mode and just try that for a little bit every day, even just for a couple of minutes, and it will really develop, and you pretty soon get to a point where you're faster and faster every time.
Yeah. What I love about that is that I feel like there's 2 schools of thoughts. Either you gradually learn something before you actually implement it, or you just dive straight on into the deep end. But that's not always the case for everything, right? Like, you can't just dive straight into the deep end when it comes to posing couples, because you only have so much time with finding somebody and getting them in front of your camera. So you do have to take these shorter moments and then try to just do them more often. But that manual mode example is perfect, right? We're not saying, you could be the person who just wants to turn it to M and, lock it in place, use super glue and, never turn it off. But I found that for me, when it came to posing my couples, because I only had that time in front of them that was so short, what would help me a ton was when I would get ready for an engagement session, I'd be packing up my bag. I would have the couple's name in my head, and I would just verbally say out loud the directions that I will be giving them to get them into a specific pose
that's a great
or position.
Idea.
Yeah. So then that way, when you get there, it doesn't feel like you're starting from scratch. It's like, oh, wait, I already said this earlier. Now it's easier to kind of remember these things. And I always did the first 30 minutes of my engagement session almost exactly the same, just to ensure that I got all the shots, because I have a pretty terrible memory when it comes to bouncing all over the place. And then the last 30 minutes was just fun, goofing around, trying some interesting and more creative stuff. But yeah, there's always a way to figure out, I think, how you can implement more of a strategy or more of a technique into your everyday life, even if it's not a dedicated 6, 8, 12 hours of learning. As you said, maybe it is just 5 minutes a day, and that'll do it.
And what could be a danger is that you leave it too long. You leave it a couple of weeks, and then you do spend an hour doing it, and then leave it another 2 weeks. And every time you do that, you're going back to square one every time, and it's just painful every time. On the Photographer Unleashed online course that I've launched, we do go into manual mode straight away. And it's slow to start with, but there's a process that I've devised which makes it really easy. And then we go into aperture priority afterwards, because I find that way, if you're never using manual mode, you'll never get good at using manual mode. So if you know what the camera's doing in manual mode and what the process is to find your settings, which is pretty much what aperture priority is doing, it's just doing it for you, you can then use aperture priority or auto, because you can then use it as a tool to help get you through certain situations, and because you know what it's doing. But if you're doing it in a way, if you're using aperture priority because manual mode is just a bit of a sort of black hole of knowledge at the moment, then I think you're never going to get out of it. You're never going to kind of experiment with manual mode. But just going in little and often and seeing how it works in a controlled environment, so it's not like you're in a wedding shoot or someone's watching you, because that, as soon as you get pressure like that, it's very hard to think straight. And I think that's a really good idea with a couple, because it's all about confidence, isn't it? If you've done that, Raymond, you're going to then be much more confident, aren't you, with a couple, and they're going to feel that confidence. And as soon as there's a slight kind of crackle in that confidence, it's like blood to a shark, isn't it? They can tell.
Yeah. Did we pick the right person? Is he going to ruin our wedding?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you're worried about that, and then you both had it. so it's such a good idea.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point if you don't prepare for these things. That's exactly right. And let me just share a personal story real quick. So I told you before we hit record, my son has really been into plane spotting recently. So like we've been going to a lot of air shows, right? And just for fun, I decided that I'd bring my camera along with him and take some photos. And I bombed this thing. Like it was terrible. Like for so long shooting weddings, you get used to changing your autofocus mode as the bride's walking down the aisle or, just different moving subjects. You just get into that muscle memory. Well, because I hadn't been doing that for so long and the type of photography that I do now is much more personal and still and not fast moving, man, trying to go back and forth in between these focusing modes, I was missing shots left and right and trying to get the focusing point in the right spot. I missed so many shots. And it was exactly what you said, because I hadn't been using it in so long that I lost it. So then immediately after that, I took it to my daughter's softball game because I was like, she's going to have to run down to first base. I'm going to work on focusing modes again. And, after a few weeks, it feels like I'm starting to get there again. But yeah, absolutely. Once you learn these things, you got to keep doing them. Otherwise, it's not as easy as just riding a bike. There's a lot more involved.
Yeah.
And especially with like different camera systems and
it's occupying a bit of your brain, isn't it? And every bit of new information is all competing for the same space, and it will just push out the stuff that was least used.
Exactly. Yeah, do not want that. So, well, we have reached the end here. We're at number 7. Is that right?
No, we've got one more, which is we've kind of covered this already, but look for lovely light. And it's my theory of you can take a photo of something that's beautiful in flat, dull light, and it won't be very interesting. You won't love the photo. But if you find a little shaft of sunlight coming through some trees and you put anything into that little pool of light, doesn't matter if it's a cup of coffee, your flask of coffee, a shoe, anything, it will just look really interesting and beautiful. And so that's, again, something that we always start looking for. And if we're doing that in the background, looking for that light, eventually, well, this is a little trick we do at weddings, isn't it? You've got the bride's bouquet. You go into a church, and you see a shaft of sunlight coming through the window. You just move the bouquet to where that light sits. You don't just take it on the other pew because it's in shade. You move it, and people think, "Wow, what a photo!" God, the timing must have been perfect. It's like, well, no, I just moved it because you have to sort of, work within the parameters of chaos, which is what weddings are. Everything's out of our control. So that when we can put things in our control, we definitely want to take those opportunities. But looking for that lovely light all the time, whether it's like a family and it's that very rosy golden hour light at the end of the day, we suddenly start to say, oh wow, I can actually shoot straight into the sun here, and it looks really lovely, really warm, and very inviting. You're shooting in the middle of the day, it's really hard. It's really hard work. If they've got the sun behind them, they're very dark. If the sun in front of them, everyone's squinting, so it's a really tough time to shoot. And just identifying what that good light is can really help us choose our composition.
I'm going to go one step deeper, since this is the beginner photography podcast. A lot of people I hear, when you're like, yeah, look for light, they're like, I see light all the time. Like, what are you talking about? There's light everywhere. Like, what do you mean look for the light? Do you have any exercises for beginners to start to see things like direction and quality of light?
Yeah, so when I say interesting light for me, and it's different for everybody, because photography is about light, and we've all got different styles of photography, so we all treat light differently. Yeah. I'm very much I have quite a Russian, Italian kind of oil painted style. That's what I like to put in photos, if I can. So that's always having the subject of that photo being the brightest thing in the shot. And that's a pretty good starting point. If you've got, doesn't matter if it's college photos, your kids, dogs, anything, if there's brighter stuff behind them, then it's going to be quite hard to work with that light. If they're the brightest thing in that photo, and that means if it's a really bright sunny day, then people are often correctly going into shade because it's just too harsh otherwise. But when you go into shade, you've got to make sure there's also shade in the background behind. If you go into shade and there's a really bright building behind, it's just going to blow the highlights, and it's going to be really hard to work with. So that's one really easy tip I can give people that are starting their journey, is to just make sure that someone's either the brightest thing, or at least there's nothing else brighter in the frame. That's going to make a big difference.
That is good. That is something that I think so many people can just be aware of next time they go out and shoot. When I go out and shoot, when I would practice, I would think to myself, what's the one thing I'm going to focus on today? Rather than I'm going to work on creating 9 bangers. Every single shot has to be absolutely perfect. And focusing on something like that, how can I make my subject the brightest thing in the frame, is huge. And I really don't hear a lot of people talk about that. But now that I think about that, one of the things that people I see do most when it comes to editing in Lightroom is they'll use an AI mask on the subject, bump up their exposure a quarter or a half a stop, and then invert the mask as well, and then bring down the exposure of everything else in the frame a quarter or half a stop, because it does give that effect, right? I don't know if it was, is it Caravaggio? Is that the right painter? Or
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Rembrandt or, yeah, all that. Yeah.
it gives that effect, and it is pleasing to the eye, and it makes your subject stand out. So as you said, kind of one of your first key themes is, oh, I totally just lost it. It was,
Making the subject the brightest thing.
yeah, making the subject the brightest thing, and so that when you go out and shoot, yeah, just always looking for the light. Like, that's always incredibly important to do. That was a great exercise, even in the midst of my brain fart there. I apologize for that. So that was 7. That was awesome. Let me ask you a question here, because now you do have the history of shooting weddings for years here. And one of the things that I think new photographers are always wondering is, like, when you get into photography, you're working on the photography. You're working on your camera settings. You're trying to get compelling images. You're working on your editing. But then for those who do one day want to start a business, turn their hobby into a side hustle and generate an income, it's almost like their brain goes blank, like that brain fart that I just had. And they don't know exactly what to work on to start to make progress there. So what would you say if somebody has worked on the camera skills, they're pretty confident in that, and they're ready to start working on growing a business? What is one thing that they should start focusing on this week to get them there?
You want to be getting your work in front of people that are likely to be interested. So that's using social media, your website, although people aren't just going to go and visit your website because your SEO is going to be low still. So, but getting your work out there, and that's the main thing. To most couples that are likely to be booking a wedding photographer, they're generally, we've got to speak generally because everyone's so different, but generally they're not experts in photography. And over a certain level, pretty much all of our photos look exactly the same. So what they're going to be buying is you and your passion for it. So communicating that through social media, through your website. Anytime you're talking about your photography or your business, you need to be saying about why you're doing it, rather than this is what I do, look at my photos. It's, I just love wedding photography. I love being part of that amazing day and creating these memories for you. Whatever that sounds like when it comes from in your voice, that's what you need to be getting out there, because that's what people buy. And if they resonate with that, then you kind of half sold them already. The images is, if they're good enough, then that's not a deal breaker. Then they're looking at price and other things, but all those things are much more easier to overcome if they're emotionally invested in you as a photographer from the outset. And the only way to do that is to be completely authentic. And even to say, I'm new to this area, I'm really looking to start weddings, I'm absolutely just so excited about this. That excitement is what people will buy. You know, don't just silently post photos, because you're then up against a million other photographers that are also just posting photos, and that isn't what people are buying. They're buying the reason why you do it, and to have you there on their day. If they resonate with your personality, they're going to want to have you as part of their day, because they'll know you fit in well with their family and their guests. They can only do that if you show your personality as authentically.
And let me add something onto that, which is that it can change as well over time. Like, your reason, your love for this thing can change over time. So, like, don't get hung up trying to craft the world's most perfect reason why you're into photography. Like today, as you just said, Nick, maybe it's, I just moved here and visually it's very different and it gets me excited to shoot. That's fine. But 10 years from now, it could be you just really love the connection between two people who come from large families. Like, it can change and adapt over time.
Absolutely. Whatever it changes to, just make sure that that's present in all of our voices, because otherwise we're all saying the same thing, which is going to capture wonderful moments of your day, blah blah blah. You know, and there's just nothing there. But if we all sound the same, because we're all saying the same kind of stuff, our photos are indistinguishable in the main, because most people aren't experts in photography. So all they're looking at is your price, and that's what they're judging on, and which is not a big deal for a beginner, but it is if you're actually having a mission to sort of go up into the higher levels of photography. You need to have something different. They need to know why they should pick you over somebody else.
Perfect. Well, Nick, I think today went as well as our last interview. I really enjoyed our chat today, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these 7 things as well, because A lot of listeners have a lot of questions. There's a lot of self-doubt, and hearing from somebody who's been doing this as long as you have, I think can give people the confidence that either they're on the right track or now they know what direction to take their photography. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today and chatting. But second, I know listeners are going to be thinking, this was great. I want to learn more about Nick. The way he communicates is fantastic. Where can listeners find out more about you online?
They should head to the Nick Church Creative Academy. So that's www.nickchurchcreativeacademy.com. And on there is coaching courses and online courses. And the online courses are currently still half price. There's a launch offer on those. And these 7 themes that I've just talked through is one of the lessons in the Photographer Unleashed online course. So there's Photographer Unleashed, Lightroom Unleashed, and Photoshop Unleashed as well. So it's all video, pre-recorded lessons, and people just run it at their own pace. And there's a community on there as well, and there's my support throughout. Because I found that I created the Academy because I find a lot of people that are starting out, you go to YouTube and there's just so much content, it's unstructured and you're not sure if it's right. You don't know what questions to even search YouTube to find the answer to. So this is much more structured, takes you from the ground up and builds you into someone that's actually thinking like a photographer, which I think you probably sense from the way that I've talked about it. It's not just the technical stuff, and all those things are important, and that's in there as well, but it's actually thinking about light and thinking about our photography and making it something that's actually, something we're really passionate about. And that's how I believe that we learn the best, is sort of start thinking in this way and using manual mode slowly to start with, building up our skills. So that's the online courses. So that'd be the best place to come in. And there's contact page. Any questions about anything, including the stuff I've said today, I'll be more than happy to answer.
All right. So your action item for the day being, if you implement just one thing from today's interview into your photography that's going to move the needle forward, let it be this: critique the next 10 photos that you see. I mean, this could be photos in online ads. It could be a magazine that you're reading while waiting for a haircut, or probably most likely just scrolling Instagram. So the next 10 photos that you see, critique them specifically to learn from them. So look for something that you like in each photo. It could be the light, it could be the action or moment, it could be the framing, anything. Find anything that you like. Then mentally figure out how, if you wanted to achieve something similar in your next photo shoot, how would you go about doing so? Is it an editing technique that you want to get better at? Is it a specific type of light that you need to look out for while shooting? Is it shooting through the moment just a second or two longer to get fuller expressions? What is the thing that you love, and how can you achieve it? When we start to look at everyone else's work as inspiration rather than comparison, you start to rewire the brain in a positive way, focused on growth rather than focusing on the gap in skill level. So give it a try. All right, that is all that I got for you today. Until next week, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Start a conversation. Grow together. That is it for this week. Remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.